Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So today I've got the Ibanez back on the bench for what I hope is the last episode. And when you last saw this thing, we had just put together most of the parts. I've got the strings on and I started the setup. But what I discovered was things were still settling out and I wanted to add a couple of parts anyway. So that's why we're doing this last episode. Now after things settled, the tremolo is floating correctly and the relief in the neck looks good to me. But the one thing that's not right is the action, and it's much too high, especially up in these upper frets. So I bought some neck shims and we're going to install one of those today because the bridge is already as low as it can go. Then beyond that, I wanted to set this thing up so it's really quite usable for a beginning player. So I wanted to add a tremolo stabilizer or trem stopper, and I've got that, and we'll do that install as well. And then finally, if you remember, I did want to set intonation on this thing with a tool because I thought it would be more accurate than just trying it without the tool. So I bought one of those little intonation tools and we'll use that today as well. Alright, so this is the pack of neck shims that I bought from Amazon, and it comes in a 3-pack with a 1/4, a 1/2, and a 1 degree. And you can use combinations of these, so you can go anywhere from no shim at all the way up in 1/4 increments up to 1.75 degrees. Since I need to gain quite a bit of adjustment in my bridge, I think I'm going to start with the 1 degree and we'll move on from there. But the first thing I've got to do is I've got to get this neck off. Now even though this guitar has a locking nut, I still release the locking nut, detune, and put a capo at the first fret because I don't want to stress the strings. Once the screws are out of the way, I can remove the neck and test fit the shims with the thickest part toward the bridge. You can trim these shims with just a pair of scissors, and they're obviously made for Fender necks, but they'll work in just about any application if you're willing to modify the holes, which I did with the use of a rat tail file. Now here's a quick shot of the completed shim, and you can see the modified holes. But I didn't show the process of actually drilling the body holes a little bit larger because the screws were sticking in them just a little bit, and I noticed that when I put it together the first time. But at any rate, after putting it back together, I gave everything a quick adjustment, including raising the bridge, doing a little bit of quick check of action, and adjusting the tremolo springs as well. Okay, well after getting the neck bolted back on with the shims in place, I have enough room to adjust the action exactly where I want it. But the main thing that the shims were able to gain me was more height on my tremolo and also more room to adjust my pickups because they were basically buried in the body. So this was really just about buying myself some room to make all these adjustments that were needed and also get the action lower. Now the reason all that was necessary is mostly because I took a little bit off the fretboard when I was replacing the frets and changing the radius. So I lowered the fretboard, and also when I sanded the finish off the neck, I took some finish off the back of the neck, which pushed the neck down further into the pocket. So basically these full-length shims are just raising it back up to where it needs to be and giving it a little bit of angle. By the way, you won't see this in the fast forward video, but I did actually add 2 shims. I ultimately added the 1 degree and the 1/2 degree, and that gives me the height that I needed. You really wouldn't know it from the pictures because it looks like just one shim because I cut them exactly the same. Alright, now we're back to getting the setup correct on this thing. I'll worry about the pickup height later, and I'll probably do that off camera to be honest, but I do want to do the intonation because I got that tool. Now this is the intonation tool that I bought, and I'll show you a closer up picture of it. But basically it clamps on to the back of the block, or I guess the base plate technically, and it pulls against the lock screw. That allows you to release the screw that holds your saddle down and adjust it forward or backward and then tighten the screw again. The way I'm going to do this, and I've never really done this before to be honest, but I'm just kind of guessing based on how I know Floyd's work, I'm going to go ahead and install this and take the slack out. Alright, that's got the slack out of it and it's fully in place, firm. Then I can release this screw here. Okay, now the saddle is floating. So all I need to do is fire up the tuner, and I'm going to do a normal intonation. And now normal intonation, you're comparing the 12th fret harmonic with the 12th fret fretted note, and you're adjusting accordingly. If the fretted note is sharp, I'm going to move the saddle backward, which means tightening this screw. If it's flat, you loosen the screw to move the saddle forward. Alright, well irony of all ironies, it's actually intonated right now, so I'll just move on to the next string. This one is ever so slightly sharp. I almost wouldn't even move it, but I want to have something to show you here. When you get that intonation correct, just lock down the saddle screw. All right, well, things are working out well here, so I'm just going to do the rest of these 4 strings off camera, and then we will move on to the Tremolo stabilizer. And this is the unit, and it's sold under a couple of different brand names, including Music Lily and ESP. It's basically a spring-loaded little plunger, and it provides enough force against the tremolo block so that if you rest your palm on the tremolo or you're bending a note or something, it doesn't overcome the springs, so the tremolo doesn't actually move. So it's intended for you to actually have to touch the arm for the tremolo to actually do something. Now this one doesn't actually lock the tremolo into place, but it should help you if you break a string as well. Now to get started with one of these, you need to remove your back plate. And you'll see here that I've moved the springs over so that there is a gap between them. I'm still running 3 springs. I did actually try 2, and that didn't work out for me. I would have had to have run the screws too far into the body. So I've added a 3rd one just for extra support. And I'm going to install the trem stopper or the stabilizer into this void here. Now the way that I was told to install these is so that the plunger had about a 1/2 inch out from the base, but I don't think that's actually correct. I think I'd like to run it where I've got a little bit more adjustability. I'm going to say maybe 1/8 of an inch or so sticking out past the back of the adjuster screw. Or I guess technically it's an adjustment nut. That gives me a little bit of room to run this forward or backward, and it has plenty of adjustability here in the middle for the spring tension. That's what this adjuster in the middle is for. Now to start with, you don't just flip your guitar over and start messing with the tremolo at that point, because you're actually resting on the tremolo if you do it that way. So I've got a couple of 2x4s set up with a microfiber towel across the top so I don't scratch any finish. And I'm just going to flip this thing over so it's not resting on the tremolo, and then we'll do our drilling. This provides me a good point, since the guitar is already set up and in tune, to know exactly where the tremolo is going to be. Then I can put my unit in here, go ahead and set it up where it's right against the block, and I think that's going to work out great. Now one thing I am noticing, and I'll show you a picture of this, but this unit is a little bit high, and I think that's just because there's a lot of trash in the routing and in the paint. But I'll go ahead and scrape away a little bit of that with a chisel. Then I'll get this thing setting flat with good contact against the block, and then we'll drill. Alright, everything's been chiseled away, and I've got a flat surface to set this on, and it now fully contacts the block. And when I say fully contacts, the bottom of the block edge is actually above the top of that little barrel that goes through this thing, and that's exactly where I want it. Now I have noticed that a lot of these models come with some sort of a rubber pad that goes on the block itself, and this one did not come with that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a little piece of humbucker tape, humbucker wrapping tape, and I'm just going to stick it up against the block where it touches the adjuster. The point of this tape is just to make sure that there's no metal on metal contact, and so when the tremolo comes back up against the adjuster, there's not a clanging sound, especially one that you can detect in your pickups. Now what I'm going to do is drill a couple of pilot holes. I'm just going to hold this in place. It's not super critical that it stays in place during this process, so I'll just drill 1 hole for 1 screw. I'll put that screw in, and then we'll drill the other ones. Well, this is bizarre, but these screws don't pass freely through the frame of this thing, so I'm going to take a drill bit and enlarge the holes in the frame. Alright, well that was purely crazy. I don't know why they would send screws that don't fit through the body of this thing, but they did. That's the first screw. I don't want to over tighten anything because there really is no purpose in these except to hold the thing from moving back that way. Now if you're wondering if these screws back here went through the cavity, they did, but there was enough wood there for them to bite into, so I'm not worried about that. And the front screws did not go in at all. Now this particular unit did not come with instructions, but what I've read about other units is that you're supposed to run them all the way up against the tremolo block, and then just a little bit tighter than that. Then tighten the claw screws just a little bit so that everything is pushed nice and snugly back against this thing. And the point is that you don't want to be able to bend a string and change the pitch of the other strings. Alright, well I've been playing around with this thing for a while, and it's actually kind of fun to mess with that little adjuster on the stabilizer. What I ended up doing was running the screws in about a full turn. that tightens up the tremolo against the adjuster. Then if you tighten the spring on the stabilizer itself, that increases the tension it takes to actually pull the tremolo up. And what it ends up doing is creating quite a lot of back pressure on the tremolo, so that if you were to break a string, or if you do a string bend or something, these other strings don't go out of tune. Now that's true, except I will say if you're really aggressive about bending a string, you're still going to change the pitch of the others. But you know, I can do a normal full step bend without doing any kind of change to the pitch of the high E string here, so it's working as it's intended to. And since everything is level now and I've got everything adjusted where I want it, I can finally put on the back plate. I almost forgot, I did so many repairs to this thing that I actually covered up the old screw hole here for this part, so I've got to re-drill that. Well, that's it for the resurrection of this old beast. I'm going to be putting together a package with the gig bag and the obviously the accessories here, some picks and some other things, and I'll be giving it away to some up-and-coming guitar student that I have yet to find. But if I do end up finding that and there's an update on this thing, I'll be sure to share it with you. I just want to say thanks to Tom, who was the original owner of the guitar, and also thanks to Mike, who donated several of the parts that went into this thing. It's because of their generosity that this thing will see the light of day again, and it'll be in the hands of somebody who's really going to appreciate it. Well, this was a long project, and I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to go watch the Super Bowl with the luxury of not caring who wins today. I want to say thanks again for all the likes and all the comments. Thank you all for visiting my Amazon links, because those really help me, so look in the description for those. Also look for that link to Hack's Guitar Hobby group on Facebook. I appreciate all you subscribers. Thanks, and I'll see you guys next time.